Welcome, dear viewers, to another deep dive into the inexplicable, the bizarre, and the utterly heart-wrenching here on Family Secrets Unveiled. Tonight, we unravel a tale that defies logic, a story so steeped in sorrow and strange occurrences that it almost seems plucked from the pages of a Gothic novel. Imagine, if you will, a life brimming with promise, a love story painted in the brightest hues of hope and devotion, only to be twisted, irrevocably, by an event so simple, yet so profoundly catastrophic. This isn't just a story about a lost object. It's about a lost soul, a shattered dream, and the terrifying whispers of a past that refuses to stay buried. Our narrative begins in the quaint, picturesque town of Willow Creek, a place where time seemed to move a little slower, where neighbors knew each other's names, and where the scent of honeysuckle hung heavy in the warm summer air. It was in this idyllic setting that Elara Vance, a woman whose beauty was only matched by her kindness, found her soulmate in Arthur Sterling. Arthur, with his gentle eyes and a laugh that could chase away any shadow, was a respected architect, his hands often smudged with charcoal, reflecting his artistic spirit. Elara, on the other hand, was a gifted botanist, her days spent nurturing life, her fingers always earthy, mirroring her connection to the natural world. They were, by all accounts, perfect for each other, two halves of a beautifully complex whole. Their wedding, a sun-drenched affair held in Elara's beloved botanical garden, was the talk of Willow Creek for months. Every detail, from the delicate lace of Elara's gown to the ancient oak under which they exchanged their vows, spoke of a love that was meant to last an eternity. Arthur had designed Elara's wedding ring himself, a unique piece crafted from white gold, encircling a rare moonstone that shimmered with an ethereal blue light, flanked by two tiny, perfectly cut diamonds. He told her it symbolized their love, rare, luminous, and ever-changing, yet utterly unbreakable. Life, for Elara and Arthur, settled into a rhythm of shared dreams and quiet joys. Their small cottage, nestled at the edge of the woods, became a sanctuary filled with the scent of Elara's experimental herbs and the faint aroma of Arthur's latest architectural sketches. They planned trips, talked about children, and simply reveled in each other's presence. The moonstone ring, a constant luminous presence on Elara's left hand, was more than just jewelry. It was a tangible symbol of their sacred bond, a promise whispered and sealed on that radiant day. She never took it off, not for gardening, not for sleeping, not even for the most vigorous of household chores. It was a part of her, an extension of her very being. Then came the day that cleaved their lives in two. A late autumn afternoon, a sudden, torrential downpour, and a simple act of charity. Elara had been driving home, her car laden with supplies for the local animal shelter, when she saw a stranded motorist on the side of the winding country road. Without a second thought, she pulled over, her heart always quick to offer help. It was a young woman, her face streaked with tears, her car engine smoking ominously. Elara, ever the pragmatist, assessed the situation, offering her phone, her umbrella, anything she could. As she leaned into the stranger's car, trying to understand the problem, a sudden jolt, a jarring movement, and a horrifying realization. Her hand, previously adorned with the shimmering moonstone, felt strangely bare. Her wedding ring, the symbol of her life's greatest joy, was gone. Panic, cold and suffocating, seized her. She frantically searched the car, her pockets, the damp ground around the stranded vehicle. The young woman, noticing Elara's distress, joined in the search, her own troubles momentarily forgotten. They scoured every inch, their hands sifting through fallen leaves and puddles, but the ring was nowhere to be found. The rain intensified, mirroring the storm brewing within Elara. How could it be gone? It was unthinkable. A part of her very soul felt ripped away. She eventually had to leave, the fear of Arthur's reaction, the gut-wrenching pain of loss, overwhelming her. She drove home in a daze, the steering wheel feeling foreign under her bare ring finger, the silence in the car deafening. Arthur, usually so composed, was visibly shaken by her news. His gentle face paled, and a look of profound sadness settled in his eyes. He didn't chide her, didn't question her carelessness. Instead, he simply held her, letting her sobs rack her body. They returned to the spot the next day, armed with flashlights and a grim determination, even hiring a local metal detector enthusiast. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, but the moonstone ring remained elusive, swallowed by the earth, or so it seemed. The loss cast a long, dark shadow over their once vibrant home. Elara felt a hollowness, a persistent ache where the ring used to be. Arthur tried to be understanding, but a subtle shift occurred between them. A quiet distance and unspoken grief began to creep into their perfect world. He suggested buying a new ring, a replacement, but Elara steadfastly refused. "It wouldn't be the same," she'd whisper, her voice thick with tears. "It wouldn't be our ring." The missing moonstone became a constant, painful reminder of something precious, irrevocably lost, a void that no other jewel could ever fill. Little did they know, this seemingly tragic accident was merely the first unsettling note in a symphony of secrets, a prelude to a darkness far more profound than the mere loss of a ring could suggest. The true nature of their misfortune was yet to reveal itself, waiting patiently in the shadows, ready to unravel everything they thought they knew. The silence that had settled between Elara and Arthur wasn't just the absence of words, it was the weighty, suffocating silence of unspoken questions, of guilt, and of a growing unease that permeated the very foundations of their marriage. Elara carried the burden of the lost ring like a physical weight, her once bright eyes now often distant, clouded by a sadness that Arthur seemed unable to penetrate. He, in turn, retreated, burying himself in his architectural designs, his laughter less frequent, his touch less spontaneous. The moonstone ring wasn't just a symbol. It was, inexplicably, a keystone, and without it, their carefully constructed world felt subtly off-kilter. One crisp autumn evening, several months after the incident, Elara was watering her beloved orchids in the sunroom, her mind still replaying the agonizing scene by the roadside. Her fingers, accustomed to the smooth, cool feel of the moonstone, traced the empty space on her ring finger. As she moved a pot, something glinted from under a loose floorboard near the old fireplace, a place she rarely approached. Curiosity, a faint spark in the desolation, urged her to investigate. With a trembling hand, she pried open the board. What she found sent a jolt of icy fear through her veins. It wasn't the ring, but a small, tarnished silver locket, intricately engraved with unfamiliar initials, AS and LM. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Arthur's initials, but who was LM? And why was this locket hidden, tucked away as if a secret, in their home? The locket felt heavy in her palm, its cold metal a stark contrast to the warmth of her hand. She tried to open it, but it was stubbornly sealed. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over her, confusion, a prickle of suspicion, and a strange sense of foreboding. Arthur had always been an open book, or so she believed. This hidden object, with its cryptic initials, was utterly out of character. She decided to confront him, her voice a little shaky as she called his name, the locket clutched tight. But Arthur was not in a study. In fact, his car was gone. He had a late meeting, he'd said, about a new project in the neighboring town, Fairhaven. A town he rarely mentioned. The discovery of the locket gnawed at her, turning the quiet evening into a torment of unanswered questions. Days turned into a strained dance of superficial pleasantries. Elara, unable to voice her discovery without sounding accusatory, watched Arthur with a new, unsettling scrutiny. She noticed the late-night calls he took in his study, his voice hushed, his back to the door. She noticed the slight tension in his shoulders, the way he sometimes flinched when she entered a room unexpectedly. The man she loved, the man who had woven their lives together with such devotion, now seemed to possess an aura of guarded secrecy. The locket remained hidden in her bedside drawer, a silent, metallic testament to her burgeoning fears. One afternoon, driven by an insatiable need for answers, Elara began to subtly investigate. She remembered Arthur mentioning a colleague, a fellow architect named Lillian Miller, who was also involved in the Fairhaven project. LM Lillian Miller. A cold knot formed in her stomach. Could it be her? She found an old photo album from Arthur's college days, tucked away in the attic. Flipping through the faded images, she recognized faces, shared memories. And then, there she was. A striking woman with dark, intense eyes and a cascade of auburn hair, always close to Arthur, often laughing into his ear. Lillian Miller. The photos were innocent enough, typical college camaraderie, but a particular set caught Elara's eye. A series of pictures from a college formal, Arthur and Lillian dancing, their faces close, a certain intimacy in their gaze that seemed to go beyond friendship. In one photo, Arthur was holding a locket, strikingly similar to the one Elara had found, in his hand, looking down at Lillian. Elara's breath hitched. This wasn't a random locket. This was their locket. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. Arthur had a past, a secret past that he had never revealed. And Lillian Miller was part of it. The idea of Arthur, her Arthur, having hidden a deep connection with another woman, especially one he was now working with, was almost unbearable. The lost ring, once her primary anguish, now seemed to recede, replaced by a far more insidious pain, the pain of betrayal, or at least, the terrifying possibility of it. The idyllic life they had built began to crumble under the weight of this new revelation. Consumed by her suspicions, Elara decided to visit the construction site in Fairhaven, feigning an interest in Arthur's work. She observed him from a distance, watching his interactions with the other architects. And then she saw her. Lillian Miller. Even years later, the woman from the photographs was unmistakable. Lillian was elegant, poised, and possessed an undeniable charisma. The way she and Arthur interacted, a subtle familiarity in their gestures, a shared glance here and there, sent shivers down Elara's spine. It wasn't overtly romantic, but it held a history, a comfort that Elara suddenly felt excluded from. She noticed Lillian wearing a silver charm bracelet, a single, small locket hanging from it, identical to the one Elara held in her drawer. A chill permeated Elara's very bones. It was their locket, split in two, a silent covenant. The drive home was a blur of tears and growing dread. Her perfect marriage, her perfect life, was a carefully constructed facade. Arthur had kept a significant part of himself hidden from her, a past intertwined with Lillian Miller. What else was he hiding? The lost wedding ring, once a symbol of their unbreakable bond, now felt like an ironic prophecy, foretelling a fracture she was only just beginning to comprehend. The innocence of their love, the purity of their vows, seemed tainted, sullied by this unearthed secret. Elara clutched the steering wheel, her bare ring finger aching, not just from the physical absence of the ring, but from the searing pain of a truth she was afraid to fully acknowledge. She knew, with a terrifying certainty, that the lost ring, the locket, and Lillian Miller were all threads in a tapestry far more sinister than she could have ever imagined. The gentle architect, her loving husband, was entangled in a web of deceit, and Elara, unknowingly, had stumbled into its dark center. The peaceful quiet of Willow Creek suddenly felt like a deceptive calm before a storm. The thin veneer of normalcy Elara desperately clung to finally shattered. The tension in their home became a palpable entity, a suffocating presence. She tried to approach Arthur, to talk about the locket, about Lillian, but the words choked in her throat. Each time she almost spoke, the fear of what she might uncover, of irrevocably destroying their life, held her back. But the truth, as it often does, had a way of forcing itself into the light. It began subtly, with a series of strange occurrences. Small items in the cottage would be moved, or disappear for a short time, only to reappear in odd places. A book she was reading would be found face down on a different table. A delicate porcelain figurine, a wedding gift, would be turned slightly, facing an unusual direction. Elara initially dismissed them as her own absent-mindedness, a symptom of her stress. But then the incidents grew more specific, more unsettling. She swore she could hear faint whispers late at night, a breathy, almost mournful sound, just beyond the edge of hearing. The scent of honeysuckle, Arthur's favorite, would occasionally fill their bedroom, even though it was deep winter and no such flowers were in bloom. It was enough to prickle the hairs on her neck, to make her wonder if she was slowly losing her grip on reality. One evening, Elara was alone in the cottage, Arthur having gone to another late meeting in Fairhaven. The wind howled outside, rattling the old windows. She was attempting to find solace in a cup of herbal tea when a faint, ethereal glow caught her eye. It emanated from the bedside drawer where she had hidden the locket. Her heart leaped into her throat. With a trembling hand, she pulled open the drawer. The locket, once tarnished, now shone with an otherworldly luminescence, a soft blue light pulsing from its surface. As she reached for it, a sudden, sharp pain lanced through her left hand, specifically her ring finger. She cried out, dropping the locket, which clattered to the floor, its light dimming instantly. When she looked at her hand, there on her ring finger was her lost wedding ring. The moonstone, glowing faintly as if it had absorbed the locket's light, sat perfectly on her finger, as if it had never left. Elara stared at it, her mind reeling, her breath catching in her throat. It was impossible. She had searched for months, diligently, desperately. And now it had simply reappeared? Not just reappeared, but on her finger, as if a spectral hand had slipped it back into place. The shock, the terror, and an overwhelming sense of the uncanny rendered her speechless. As she grappled with this impossible reality, her eyes fell on the locket, now lying open on the floor. The stubbornly sealed silver casing had finally sprung open, revealing two miniature photographs. One was of a young Arthur, smiling his usual gentle smile. The other was of Lillian Miller. But it wasn't the vibrant, elegant Lillian Elara had seen at the construction site. This Lillian was younger, her face radiant with happiness, but she was unmistakably pregnant. And the date beneath the photo, scrawled in delicate cursive, read, "Lillian and Arthur, our baby, July 14th, year, 2 years before Elara and Arthur's wedding." The world spun around Elara. The missing ring, the locket, Lillian Miller, and now a child? Arthur had a child with Lillian, before they were married, a child he had never mentioned, never acknowledged. The depth of the deception was a crushing weight. Her perfect love story was built on a foundation of lies, a tangled web of secrets far more intricate and devastating than she could have ever imagined. The ethereal glow, the sharp pain, the inexplicable reappearance of the ring, it all coalesced into a terrifying, supernatural truth. The ring hadn't been lost by accident. It had been taken. Just then, the front door creaked open, and Arthur stepped in, his face etched with exhaustion. He took one look at Elara, her face pale, trembling, the moonstone ring shimmering on her finger, the open locket at her feet, and his usually composed demeanor crumbled. The color drained from his face, leaving it ashen. "Elara," he whispered, his voice barely audible, filled with a mixture of fear and profound sorrow. "Explain," Elara commanded, her voice surprisingly steady despite the tempest raging within her. "Explain all of it, Arthur." And so, the dam broke. Arthur, his head bowed in shame, began to unravel a story of youthful indiscretion, of a love affair with Lillian in college that had, unbeknownst to him at the time, resulted in a pregnancy. Lillian, fiercely independent and from a wealthy, prominent family that disapproved of Arthur's more modest background, had chosen to raise the child herself, keeping Arthur's paternity a secret. She had gone abroad, given birth, and returned years later, a single mother, maintaining a carefully constructed facade of a life lived independently. Arthur had only recently discovered he had a son, a brilliant, sensitive boy named Daniel, when Lillian had reached out, seeking his help with a legal matter concerning their son's inheritance. The Fairhaven project was a cover. He had been spending his late meetings secretly building a relationship with his estranged son, trying to right the wrongs of a past he never knew existed. The locket, he explained, was a gift to Lillian when they were young, a promise of a future that never materialized for them, a future he hadn't even known included a child. Lillian had given him half, keeping the other, a secret bond between them. As for the ring, Arthur's eyes were filled with a haunted, desperate look. He admitted, with a shuddering breath, that he had not found the ring. He swore he hadn't. But he confessed that the night before, he had a vivid dream. A dream where Lillian appeared to him, her eyes filled with a desperate plea. She spoke of the ring, not as a lost object, but as a key. She warned him that something was terribly wrong, that a dark force was at play, tied to their past, to their son. She then pressed something into his hand in the dream, something cold and luminous. He woke up in a sweat, dismissed it as a nightmare, but then he paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. Elara, I had another locket, just like yours, a charm on a bracelet that Lillian gave me in college. I kept it hidden. It disappeared from my desk last night. And I felt a strange compulsion, a pull, a chill, just as you described. Elara stared at him, her mind struggling to process the layers of deceit, the impossible, supernatural element woven into the fabric of their lives. A child. A secret child. And Lillian, not just an old flame, but a woman who is now a ghost, or something far more terrifying. The reappearance of her ring, the strange glowing locket, Arthur's confession, it all pointed to something beyond the realm of human explanation. The realization that Lillian was not just a past love, but a spirit, or something influencing their world from beyond, sent a profound chill through her. The lost ring wasn't just lost, it was a pawn in a game she was only just beginning to understand, a game played by unseen forces, perhaps by a mother desperate to protect her child, even from the grave. The climax wasn't just a confrontation, it was the terrifying unveiling of a world where the boundaries between life and death, truth and deception, were terrifyingly blurred. The truth, when it finally unfurled, was a chilling tapestry woven with love, deceit, and the spectral tendrils of a grief that refused to be silenced. Arthur, his voice hoarse with pain and regret, continued his confession. Lillian, he revealed, had not simply reached out to reconnect for their son, Daniel. She had been gravely ill, a rare and aggressive form of cancer consuming her, and had wanted Arthur to finally know Daniel, to be a father to their son before it was too late. But there was more. Much more. Lillian had also shared with him a recurring, terrifying nightmare she'd had in the final months of her life. A nightmare where a shadow, a malevolent presence, was trying to claim Daniel, trying to tear him away. She had believed the moonstone ring, Elara's ring, was somehow connected, a protective ward. She had convinced herself that if it was lost, if it left Elara's finger, it would somehow create a vulnerability, an opening for this shadow. In her desperation, in her fevered, dying state, she had orchestrated the theft of the ring herself, having paid the stranded motorist, a distant acquaintance, to create the diversion and deftly remove it from Elara's finger. She had then hidden it, intending to return it after she had somehow secured Daniel's safety. But death had claimed her before she could. Arthur's words hung in the air, heavy and thick with unshed tears. The kind, gentle man Elara had married was capable of such a profound lie, such a tangled secret, all to protect a child he hadn't known he had. Elara felt a maelstrom of emotions, anger at the deception, profound sadness for Lillian's tragic fate, and a terrifying empathy for a mother's desperate love. But the supernatural element remained. The glowing locket, the ring's impossible reappearance, the whisper of a vengeful shadow. Lillian, she's gone, Elara, Arthur finally admitted, his voice barely a whisper. She passed away a week ago, just after she reached out to me, just before she could tell me everything. But she told me of the locket, and how she felt a bond, a connection to it, to our son. She said it was their last hope, a way to warn me, to protect Daniel if anything happened to her. Elara finally understood. The strange occurrences, the whispers, the scent of honeysuckle, the luminous locket, the reappearance of her ring, it was Lillian. Her spirit, or something of her essence, was reaching out from beyond the veil, desperate to protect her son, to fulfill her final, dying wish. The moonstone ring, Arthur's symbol of eternal love for Elara, was also, tragically, Lillian's key, a conduit for her desperate spirit to intervene, to complete her unfinished mission. Lillian, in her dying fear, had seen the ring as a link to an opposing force, not as a symbol of Elara's love, but as something to be controlled, a tool in her desperate attempt to protect Daniel from this shadow she perceived. Her dying wish, her sheer will, had manifested, perhaps through the combined power of the two lockets, the one Elara found, and the one Arthur suddenly remembered having. The pieces clicked into place, forming a picture both heartbreaking and terrifying. The shadow Lillian feared was not a metaphor. It was real, and it was after Daniel. Elara and Arthur, united by a truth they never sought, found themselves bound by a shared, supernatural responsibility. They had to protect Daniel, a child who was both Arthur's son and the target of an unseen malevolence. The resolution was not a tidy, happy ending. It was a somber understanding, a fragile piece forged in the crucible of tragedy and the inexplicable. Elara, holding Arthur's hand, the moonstone ring now a shimmering, heavy presence on her finger, knew their marriage would never be the same. The innocence was gone, replaced by a profound, almost gothic awareness of the unseen forces that could shape human lives. They faced the future not as a blissful couple, but as guardians, bound by a promise to a dead woman, a promise to protect a child they were only just beginning to know. They visited Daniel, a quiet, brilliant boy with his mother's intense eyes. He was grieving, struggling with the sudden loss of Lillian. Elara, with a tenderness she hadn't known she possessed, felt an immediate connection to him. She saw the fear in his eyes, a fear that mirrored Lillian's final nightmares. The cottage, once a sanctuary, now felt like a watchtower, a place where they would stand guard. The honeysuckle scent lingered, a gentle, mournful reminder of Lillian's protective presence. The moonstone ring, no longer just a symbol of Elara's love for Arthur, now carried the added weight of Lillian's desperate legacy, a beacon against the encroaching darkness. The lost wedding ring had indeed reappeared on her finger, not as a simple return of a lost item, but as a chilling message, a warning from beyond the grave, forever altering the fabric of Elara and Arthur's lives. It was a tangible link to a world hidden just beneath their own, a testament to a mother's unending love, and a catalyst for a battle against an unseen enemy. Their story, our story on Family Secrets Unveiled, is a potent reminder that love, in all its forms, romantic, parental, even spectral, can transcend the boundaries of life and death, and that sometimes the greatest secrets are not just hidden, but actively guarded by forces we can barely comprehend. The quiet town of Willow Creek, once a picture of serenity, now held the echoes of a timeless struggle, a fight for the soul of a child, watched over by a moonstone ring that had returned from the impossible. Thank you for joining us on this harrowing journey. If you were captivated by this tale of love, loss, and the supernatural, please show your support by giving this video a like, subscribing to Family Secrets Unveiled for more untold stories, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss another deep dive into the mysteries that surround us. Until next time, stay vigilant and remember, some secrets refuse to stay buried.